Hello, my name is David Turner, and as ever, this is the Lunar Poetry Podcast. This month I'm in Basildon, and I'm joined by Olmo, Lazarus and Sioni Richards, and collectively they're known as Tory Town Poets. We're going to start with Olmo and Sioni giving us brief introductions about themselves. Oh, actually, first, you might hear some scratching in the background. It's Buster the dog. He's massive and he's mental. So we're not scratching the floor. So maybe Olmo could start with just a brief introduction into himself and his work.
Okay, yeah, my name's Olmo Lazarus. Primarily, I'm a poet, and I do two kinds of poetry really. I mean, I do children's poetry, but I also do kind of spoken word stuff. And under the Tory Town Poet umbrella, it's mostly the spoken word stuff that I focus on. I tend to write an awful lot about Basildon, like where we're from, and kind of. A lot of it is about my experiences growing up in this town, and almost all of it is rooted in real life, about people I know and about things I've seen, and I suppose I like to be a bit of a storyteller really. That's kind of what I try to get through my poetry.
Yeah, and Sioni?
Hi, I'm Sioni. I'm an artist from Basildon in Essex. I started doing spoken word poetry about 18 months ago.
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that. Also, primarily making work about Basildon, where I grew up, places I've been, and the people that I've seen. A lot of it's kind of just the reality of where we're from, and slightly politicised, so kind of like a left-wing outlook on stuff. But yeah, that's about it really.
Cheers. Right, so the discussion today is going to mainly focus on the culture, or maybe lack of it, in satellite towns in the UK.
Yeah.
And I hope we're going to talk widely enough for the discussion to be relevant to listeners in Bolton or Gateshead. But as we're in Basildon today, we'll be focusing on the town's relationship with locally Southend and more widely with London. So maybe between the two of you, give us a bit of information first about Basildon and what it's like, the kind of town it is.
The kind of town it is. Well, Basildon's a new town. It was built after the war, and like I think you find a lot of new towns. It's almost like devoid of a history almost. Everything's very kind of prefab and was knocked up very quickly. And what I feel anyway, growing up here and living here, is we lack a cultural element. There isn't that kind of culture here. So people who are interested in visual art, in poetry, music, we have to travel to try and get that. I mean, if you're interested in poetry and art, Basildon is not a place where you're, generally speaking, going to find it. We have to either go in one direction to kind of Southend-on-Sea, or the other direction to go to London if we want to go to open mic poetry nights, if we want to go see an art exhibition, if we want to see a band play, anything like that.
Yeah, I think that is and that's enough for context, I think. First question, who, what, why Tory Town Poets?
Do you want me to kick off with this?
Go for it.
Right, Tory Town Poets. You can kind of trace the origins of Tory Town Poets back quite a few years actually, because although I have been writing for quite a long time, I've only been doing spoken word for a year and a half, maybe 2 years max. Before then, I was in quite a few bands, quite a few awful bands, and used to write lyrics for them and stuff. And I was in a couple of punk bands and a bit of a hip hop outfit, and we'd done kind of like lyrics, and that's how my writing started. After my last band split up, and I mean I'm going back about 5 years now. A mate of mine was in a band, and he asked me, could you write some lyrics for me, because he was a vocalist and a guitarist, but he was absolutely hopeless at writing, and he said to me, can you write me some lyrics? So I ended up putting together a little booklet of just kind of collected poems and writings and ramblings and stuff, and that whole project never really happened, but I ended up labelling this little booklet the Tory Town Poems.
Okay.
And that just kind of stayed stagnant for a very long period of time. It never ever got used. And then I believe the next kind of step towards Tory Town Poets happening was, well, it was when you went to see Big Audio Dynamite, wasn't it?
I went to see Big Audio Dynamite, and they do a lot of like sampling in their music, and I got quite interested in it. And I knew Jack had done a lot of stuff when he'd had house parties where he'd played around with like mixing songs just using like Audacity. And so I turned around to Olmo and was like, oh, could I like, you know, rack your brain? I want to do like a little music project and just try and make some beats just like purely out of sampling really. And Olmo's got a brilliant attitude where if you mention a project to him, within about 2 days he'll have completed the project. So I go home and a couple of days later Olmo's like, oh, here you go, I've made about 10 different beats, come check them out. And they were really cool, very like old school hip hop. And then Olmo kind of dug out this old book of Tory Town Poems and was like, let's have a go at playing around with that. And so then we started writing together, making music. And then after a little while, because I'm not a rapper at all, I got a bit frustrated with doing writing but not being able to do anything with it. So I kind of came up with the idea of going and checking out a spoken word gig.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was quite an organic process, wasn't it? Because I felt like, especially your writing, Sioni, where you hadn't done as much writing as me previous to Tory Town Poets, had you? Your writing was just getting more and more complex and more interesting. It was making me up my game, really. And it got to the point where Sioni's writing was getting so complex that fitting it to a beat was becoming quite an issue. Do you remember when you first tried to communicate to me how to rap that Memphis Soul Stew song?
Yes.
You could do it like that. But for me, that took me a good month of just... A man puts pen to paper, duppy writer takes flight. Just that line was just like... just trying to get it out. So I think... And we even did flirt with the idea, didn't we, of one of our CDs of saying, why don't we do a hip-hop track and a spoken word piece, and a hip-hop track and a spoken word piece. But it was when you first said, let's go to an open mic poetry night, that it kind of moved that direction. I was dubious, man. I mean, I'd had very, very little experience of spoken word poetry. I was aware that it was an art form. I mean, I knew about Scroobius Pip, you know, and that was kind of the closest I'd kind of got to experiencing that art form. And I was very dubious about trying it out. But we went to Lip Tink at the Poetry Cafe, didn't we? Mr. T. Thompson's night. And I was blown away. I fell in love with it straight away. And straight away I thought, this is the direction that Tory Town Poets is going to go now. You know, this is the next step in our evolution.
I think next we'll talk about, we'll come round to this idea of place and sort of where we grow up and how that affects us as artists. And how do you think as artists, do you answer the issue of either choosing to travel regularly to larger towns or cities in order to share your work, or staying at home and trying to establish some sort of scene?
I have not done any work in trying to establish a scene here. I mean, I'm not saying it couldn't be done. It hasn't been done, has it?
Yeah, there's kind of a small bubble of.
I was actually going to follow up with a short, like a sort of sub question in that, you know, in the knowledge that it'll probably fail.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I'll preempt that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think there's kind of a small bubble of like, and there has been since sort of we were growing up at least. There's been this little scene of local bands.
Yeah.
Lots of like Battle of the Bands kind of stuff, but that's very much rooted in kind of the metal rock scene.
Yeah.
Which kind of isn't really our bag anymore when we were
No,
kids.
it wasn't when we were growing up, wasn't it? But not now. No.
But I think like Basildon kind of comes from like this tradition of like East End London migrating out to the coast, kind of, and it's a stop-off point, I suppose, for people heading for the seaside. Really,
it is. Yeah.
And once it kind of sprung up as an actual town, I think that carried on, and so I suppose culturally, it's kind of inherited this East End identity. But I guess it's quite interesting that when we go out, we go into London to do stuff, and we're talking about Basildon. It's kind of like we're taking sort of our culture back into London, and it's kind of like this cycle that's
it's
kind of
interesting.
So, Olmo, you've still never performed in Basildon?
I've never done a gig in Basildon, no, which is very...
Sioni?
Yeah.
How about you?
No,
you said right. So
You did with bands.
Yeah,
but
as a poet,
but
no,
as a
poet,
spoken word artist, or whatever the wanky term is, like you haven't, because I suppose what I'm wondering is, do you not feel obliged to do something here, or would it just feel like a wasted effort?
I do think that if I could do something here, it would be awesome, but.
I think it would be awesome if there was an awesome venue filled with awesome people.
Yeah, it wouldn't be sustainable, would it? I reckon you could, at a real push, and I haven't got the time, energy or effort to do this, at a push I reckon you could create a one-off event. You could get enough people down, couldn't you, and do something, but you wouldn't, at the moment anyway, be able to have a monthly or even a bi-monthly thing that kind of ticked over and where you get fresh faces and exciting kind of posts coming through.
But that's another thing, isn't it? I think really initially what I mean is like even just a one-off gig.
Yeah.
Because the I don't know. I find it interesting that you don't feel, or even if you do feel obliged, that you're able to ignore it.
Yeah.
I'm not. This is not supposed to sound judgmental. I don't really have any view either way whether I believe that you should or not stay. But it's odd because it's a big effort, isn't it, to keep buying train tickets and travel to either Southend or London. It's a big cost, and
I suppose a big part of the spoken word thing is going to like the open mic nights and
well, that's
kind of
interesting.
seeing other people.
Is it really what you're aiming for? Is to mix with other people that are doing the same work? Is it you're not really searching for an audience, but maybe a connection with other poets?
I think probably, I don't know, especially when we started, it was about 50-50 of wanting to like perform, but also wanting to see other people and see what other people are doing, because we were so unaware of poetry and spoken word and what it was about, and I think there was, especially in London, there was like this scene going on. There were people doing it like every day of the week, and so many interesting people. Whereas, that wasn't happening in Basildon. Like, it doesn't happen. So it was a kind of an education, I guess.
Just a general question. This doesn't only relate to poetry, but just arts in general. If local audiences aren't engaged, isn't that the fault of the artist and not the audience? If audiences aren't being responsive, isn't that our fault?
That's a very interesting question. I mean, you've shifted the focus there, certainly. And perhaps, yes, there is a bit
sorry,
of
can I just add one sort of cover my arse a little bit? I'm not suggesting we bend our work to suit people. I'm just saying, do we need to find a different way of putting across the same message? I don't mean dumbing stuff down. I don't mean being less of an artist. I just mean finding a new way of putting that message across.
I guess it largely depends on kind of who you think you are as for, I guess.
Yeah.
Because obviously there are some artists who are very interested in engaging as many people as possible, and I think it can be seen as very pretentious to say that your art isn't for everybody, but I don't think it necessarily has to be. I think there's this idea where people talk, especially with art, people talk about art engaging the community and art engaging people, but I think we kind of forget that artists are a part of their community and that artists are people, and I think it's perfectly fair to just want to engage other artists.
I mean, I'm definitely not suggesting that we should be trying to talk to the greatest number of people as possible, because invariably that leads to art with very little substance.
Yeah.
But what I mean more is, if there is no audience, that can't just be the audience's fault. Because you surely it's within all of us to build up a small. Because how many people live in Basildon? Enough, or certainly enough people to garner a small following.
Sure.
There has to be, doesn't there? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, we have got a small Basildon following.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people from around here who like what we do. A lot of them are our mates, to be fair. But I mean, Mum, this goes out to you. But I mean, there are a few people who, after reading little articles about us, have emailed us asking to buy our books and CDs and things like that. I just
some people get annoyed because they think that we're slagging off their town.
Some people have got a little bit annoyed us in the past. Yeah,
it's our town as well.
Yeah. So what a fucking real life. We've but yeah, so there are a few people who locally who do like what we do. I just feel like for me, my primary art form is poetry, and what I lack here are the channels in order to get that across to a local audience.
I think the reason I believe that's what I just asked is more of a general question is because it comes from a point of view where people might complain that people in their local area aren't receptive, and that I don't get that impression from either of you two. You're quite happy just doing your stuff where you want to do it. I was just trying to get your point of view on, based on.
I think with art, I'm quite selfish in that I probably do it just for myself, really. And when people engage with that and enjoy it, it's like all for the better, But
I mean, I agree with you completely because I came from a visual arts background before I started writing. I mean, I've only been writing, it's not even a year yet, but 10 or 12 years within the visual arts thing. And you do become incredibly selfish, and you're allowed to, and it's never questioned. You can show your work in exactly whatever way you want. You don't have to explain anything. You can put it in a box and never show it to anyone and be perfectly justified. But there seems to be a demand with poetry that you share it and be more open with it, and which is an interesting point in itself. I mean, it is, is poetry a sort of unique art form in that way?
Yeah, I suppose especially
or in people's views maybe.
Yeah, I think especially with spoken word, because it's so much written to be performed, and if you're performing something, there's like this implication where it has to have an audience. Yes. If you've got an audience, then you have to take them into account. Whereas with visual art, you can hide behind it. You can put it in a space, and you can never actually engage directly as like the middleman between your work and the audience.
On the subject of audiences, actually, and travelling sort of away from where you're based, does the fact that so many performers and artists travel in order to share their work mean that we ourselves or our work needs justification? Does the interaction with the public give our work greater meaning? Is that what's causing us to travel, or people in satellite towns to travel?
Yeah, I do see what you mean. I think that the sharing of the art is, for me, one of the most important parts of it. I've never really been a writer for the page. I've always written to perform it, and for me, the engagement of the audience is one of the most important things, and it really helps me creatively as well. It helps me understand what works and what doesn't work. What you can even when an audience is clapping, you can see if they've engaged with a piece or not. You understand that, and it has kind of shaped my work in that respect. It must be important to me, otherwise I wouldn't be travelling. I wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether this sort of, I mean, I'm putting words into your mouth maybe, this idea of justification of your work, is that the transformation that a poem makes from page to performance? Because you could just sit at home, couldn't you? Could both stay in Basildon and just write and write and write if that was all you needed. But there's obviously something driving you on.
Yeah, I suppose there was like nothing. I mean, we went the first time we went to Lip Tink, the first open mic that we did. Olmo performed. I just kind of scouted it out to get a feel for it, because I'm not really a performer at all. Yeah. And then the second time, I kind of plucked up the courage to have a go. And I guess the reason we carried on doing it was because of the response that we got.
Yeah.
Which, like you say, that kind of engagement with the audience and being able to get kind of direct feedback, and you get like there's an adrenaline rush.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's something. I mean, certainly with visual art, I've never had that same relationship with my audience.
Well, you very, very rarely meet them, do you?
Exactly. I mean, I've seen some artworks. I went to a sculpture park in Oxford once, and there was an artist there from Barcelona, and his piece was sitting in the middle of the field, and he made a big paella for everyone who was kind of coming along, and there was that same direct engagement with the audience. I found that really interesting, and that was probably like one of the most interesting bits of art, I suppose, that I've seen, because there was the artist and you were having a chat, and there was, you know, that communication, and it was good fun. And I think there's that same thing with spoken word. You go and you have a night, and it's a fun night, and you're chatting to people, and you can have a beer, and I suppose travelling around and meeting new people is a part of that whole process. I think part of the reason why we enjoy spoken word as an art form is because it's not just about the kind of 3 minutes that you're up on stage performing, it's kind of the whole night.
The social aspect, and actually talking to people that also spend a lot of money to travel to.
And hearing the poetry as well. For me, like open micing especially, I would say for me the experience of open micing performances at the very most 50% of it, maybe even lower. I think for me the listening and engaging with other people's poetry is so important, and I get as much joy from that as I do from performing. Even to the point now where for the first time, because when I first started going to London, it was very much like, oh, I'm going to London, I better perform, I better get something out there, because, you know, I don't get to go to London as often as I'd like. But a couple of times now I've gone to open mic nights and just listened. Yeah. And I found being on the other side of that's really interesting.
Talking of listening to poetry, should we? We're gonna have a poem from Olmo.
Excellent. Yeah. I'm actually. This is new, so we'll see how this goes. First time I've ever read this one out. I actually started writing this when I met you on that train back from Sheffield. Yeah. I was.
Actually, we might come on to that. Actually, how we first met. But,
absolutely. So I scribbled this down on a train. Let's hope it works. Once upon a time, I got a degree, and it figures that the try-hard, die-hard bookworm has his time in the spotlight, rises to the top of an academic pile, classmates and dropouts in his wake, mortarboard and gown on his brow, talk of a town makes his mum proud. Photos on a mantelpiece for all to see. But then 5 years flash past like two passing trains, with faces and places blurring into obscurity. Then you're 23. Then you're 24. Then you're pushing 25, realising life moves like sped up old film. All jerky and disjointed. Slightly faster than you'd imagined. When old boys told me they still felt 16, I'd laugh. But now I walk that path and all I feel is sympathy. I look back across the road and ask, what did I achieve? Well, I can't complain, I've done okay actually, but I admit a streak of jealousy greener than Bruce Banner came over me when he walked in the club that night. I should explain. This was the hard man of the estate, not quite a mate as much an acquaintance, with the patience of a rabid beast and fists of stone he made the street his home. A real bastard. But our bastard, the bastard son of the same place that raised us. There, but for the grace of God goes I, a guy whose life is a testimony to testosterone-fueled fury, executioner, judge and jury of his own gory rules. His reign was cut short. When he was caught, not with a bag of green, a couple of E's or any other delicacy of delinquency his enterprise has seen fit to try and sell to me over the years, but a gun. That's right, a cold hard metal pocket rocket shooter like something from a gangster flick. What a prick. Old Bill picked him up in Northlands Park after dark, mid-speech in some spiteful Scarface-inspired fantasy. His mugshot spread in black and white and red all over for the town to see. 3 years inside some dank and dingy hole they left his soul to rot and dwell. In the meantime, as previously stated, I created opportunities. I'd done what was right for me. I aimed to drag myself from obscurity. I took the path that teachers and parents and those on TV had convinced me were the right way to achieve. I left our street and I made my own way in the world. In a flash of lightning, 5 years unfurled, so back to that club. Thumping bass, familiar faces, the strangest of places, we drink away the remainder of our youth. Tall cans in the air out your chair for the anthems and soundtracks of our childhood. £4 a pint for a night of nostalgia and tripping down memory lane. When like a ghost of lifetimes passed without so much as noticing me. It was he, that corner shop crawler, backstreet brawler, slightly taller and broader than memory served. And he walked by without a word, and I'd heard he was out. and had been for 2 years, and kick-started his dealings with increased curiosity. It seemed while lecturers had been teaching me, he'd been in the university of 25 to life, like a training ground for the lost and found, for youths to cut their teeth and find their feet. A first-class honours degree in applied criminality. Gold rings run up each hand like a Renaissance prince. The sharp tailored suit made to fit makes me re-evaluate my attire. I check the mirror and recoil like an arachnophobic tarantula. Perhaps t-shirt and jeans, it seems, were a touch informal. Well, the lord of the rings, the lord of the bars, the lord of the dance reclines and beckons over staff who kneel at his feet like the 3 wise men. Frankincense, myrrh and a bottle of the most expensive taste. What a waste, he necks it like tap water, and orders 4 more for his harem, who it seems have materialised, and my eyes can't drag themselves away from what I see, because it actually makes me doubt my choices. Voices in my head recall adults' advice and lies about what it takes to do well in this world. Behave yourself, keep your head down. Eventually that jealousy drains from me, and I realise in reality this is actually a tale of 2 clowns. Both mugs in our own way, trying to get by in a system where the chips are stacked against you and a man across the table is counting cards. He might have pulled a string of aces, but this place is a casino, and over time the dealer always cashes in. Life's hard and I can't blame him for choosing a route that suits him down to the ground, so when to my surprise I catch his eye, I raise a glass to the sky, I exchange a smile and return to my night. Off to fight my own fight, and I wish him luck in his.
Cheers, man. Thanks very much. I think that the next question is: do you think the way that you both write might be informed by a longing for acceptance from those you grew up around?
No.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. We'll go on to sort of explain that question.
Yeah.
But,
no, I don't particularly think so. I think that my longing for write is often I want to describe those people who I grew up around, and I want to explore who they were and what they were like, kind of share that story, but I don't think acceptance is part of that.
I think I still live in a constant inner turmoil of wanting to do stuff and wanting people to see it, but at the same time definitely not wanting anyone to see it.
Yeah.
Especially those people that I grew up around. Because others that I've spoken to from sort of similar surroundings have spoken of a resentment towards locals in the area that have grown up, and you've sort of touched on that. Probably wouldn't go as far as resentment, but there's certainly some sort of feeling of maybe bordering on resentment. I mean, do you think that's difficult to overcome? Because you were just saying like you have this turmoil. Why do you think there's that turmoil there?
I suppose a big part of it is the fact that a lot of those people knew me when I was a kid and when I was a teenager and when I went through all those awkward stages in your life, and all those times when you're kind of trying to search for like who you are and what your identity is and where you fit in, and it just makes me cringe. And I guess I don't know, to a certain extent we're still doing that, and I don't know, there's all those people that you kind of went to school with that you kind of run into in the pub and they go, oh, it's the sort of thing you're doing in the like local paper, and I don't know, I guess it's kind of still a part of stage fright in a way. It's like you're putting yourself out there. And
do you feel like in a way is it a feeling of being judged by those people?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Because I think that's what I meant by the idea of sort of having some sort of longing for acceptance, because quite often those that we would resent are from childhood, are friends and family, maybe a wider family structure, maybe not your parents, but maybe aunts and uncles and people that you don't share views with. Yeah. But isn't that, we're sort of told to love these people unconditionally. Mm-hmm. So what effect does this because that it's quite a big conflict, isn't it? That you're making something that's very important to you, mm-hmm. which naturally you should probably share with those people, but you don't feel like you.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, the people that I kind of grew up with who are like my very close friends. I'm kind of still very good friends with, and you know, those people are supportive, and we have, you know, you've got a good relationship with them, and so you know, you don't mind kind of putting yourself up there. I suppose it's more the acquaintances and then the people who knew you but a very kind of limited perspective of you, and there's something strange about them seeing that, like your best friends, they've already seen you at your absolute worst, and you've seen them at their worst, and so no one's got like a moral high ground. Whereas those people who know you and you went to school with, but you never were close to, as soon as they see something like that, like some sort of expression, and you're putting yourself out there, and suddenly they know you a lot better than you know them. And I think there's a weird kind of, it makes you feel quite vulnerable, I suppose, and quite exposed.
Do you find is it an inspiration for work, this resentment? Well, I'm just trying to work out whether it's a help or a hindrance, sort of having that.
I think, I don't know, I don't suppose I resent anyone. But I think I find that I do a lot of what I do in spite of this kind of fear of how people will like perceive you after you do it.
Sure.
It's always kind of, you're always aware of it every time you do something, every time something gets filmed or something gets recorded like this. You're kind of always aware of the fact that someone might see it, and especially with the internet, like when we first started putting videos on YouTube, you suddenly, because it shows you exactly how many people have seen it, you become very aware of the fact that you have no idea who those people are. And occasionally people will say to you, "Oh, I saw this thing that you did on YouTube," or they'll say, "Oh, I saw you in the paper," and you're like, "Oh, I can't believe that person saw it."
Before Christmas, a fella at work said, "Oh, I googled you," and there was something on YouTube which I didn't realise had gone out.
Yeah,
it was like, "You're doing this thing about keys in the kitchen drawer," and he'd only watched the first 2 minutes. It didn't make any sense. It was completely out of context. And he was like, "Is that what you do?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, but could you please go back and watch the whole thing, or like not watch it at all? Or try to forget it, maybe."
And I suppose that's the kind of the frightening thing, is that you're putting yourself out there and just have no idea who is seeing it, and then all these kind of odd people from your past end up kind of coming out of the woodwork and saying, "No, I've seen that."
Yeah,
and like I say, they know you so much better than you know them, and that's a very odd feeling.
Actually, before we move on, perhaps we'll have a poem from Sioni, if that's all right.
We were the kids, and deep inside the library of my mind you'll find the first tome I ever owned, bound in black leather with gold letters embossed on the cover, vocabulary. And it doesn't run from A to Z, it starts at mum and ends on a blank page for the last words of my final day. And words hastily written and forgotten fall from its pages like oil spills stuck in my throat on the tip of my tongue. We were the kids. All ears, eyes wide with open minds, we built our lives on wishes made from candle wax. Given a world of atom bombs and anthrax, homelessness and bedroom tax, we took the world on with our father's heavens on our backs. We were the kids, and we were deafened by your silence. It spoke the volumes of hollow planets, and then you said, "Calm down." Channel the tantric tactics of yoga fanatics. Dosed up on Prozac and lithium, diazepam and Ritalin, we were anaesthetised and abandoned. We were the kids, and we dragged ourselves up through volcanoes. We made God stop to watch the world explode, and when we were finished the world seemed hollow. We burnt down forests and drew new ones with the charcoal. Blessed are the artists, for they make this earth still worth inheriting. We were the kids, and we swam through oil spills to be here. Arrived with choked throats and clenched fists, screamed each breath like protest. We wrote picket lines in black gold on mountainsides and set fire to them for the world to behold. We were the kids and the world said no, as though talent was a rarity, and they already had the diamond in the rough, but the earth was filled with uncut gems. They just found one that was buff, so we dragged ourselves up through volcanoes and cleared our lungs of dust. Shouted poems made from oil spills so they'd remember us, and when they say the world is hollow, I say put it to your ear. You'll hear the voices of the poets and they'll be echoing for years.
Thanks, man. That was good. Actually, this is just an aside, because we sort of mentioned earlier about the difference between what poetry becomes when it's off the page.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been reading that. So as preparation, I got both the poems and printed them out. I've been reading through, trying to place them in the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been reading that for a couple of weeks, and that was just a completely different thing. That wasn't what I've been reading. It's amazing how things just transform.
Yeah.
You know? But because we only met, known Olmo for a while, and Sioni and I've only met today. I wasn't aware of your energy, you know, how you read and what the energy was in the words, but it just really came alive. But it's it's just an interesting point. Actually, and in the preparation the last couple of weeks, I've been thinking about this idea, you know, of how to place the conversation around satellite towns and how your creative development as a youngster, teenager, young adult might be different to those in the city. And I just sort of kept coming back to the point that I think it has to be pointed out that growing up in a city or a satellite town brings the same pressures to conform. You know, a simple example would be, as men, we should follow in our father's footsteps, and this perhaps where this resentment comes from, because we're not allowed to flourish creatively or whatever. But I just think, because I was just thinking, because there are a greater number of galleries in the city, it doesn't mean that the city kid doesn't feel these pressures less keenly, you know. It's still the same. So what I was wondering was, could it be that a large part of the cultural isolation, cultural isolation. Wait a minute, hang on, I've got to get this right. Cultural isolation. Fucking isolation of a satellite town is down to perhaps just social conditioning, and it doesn't actually exist. It's just you've been brought up to believe that you can't.
Yeah, and I suppose it becomes kind of self-perpetuating. Southend's got a culture because it's got a culture. Basildon doesn't have a culture because as soon as anyone brings up and decides to do something, they go somewhere else to do it. And so there's not a chance for anything. I guess it's kind of like, you know, towns that have culture, it's like a bit of a, you know, it's like stalactites and stalagmites. It it builds itself up, and people attach to it, and people are exposed to it, so then they want to take part in it. And whereas in Basildon, you kind of, like, for us, you know, we started doing something, and then we looked for where we could do it, and it was somewhere else. So then, you know, automatically we become a part of another town's.
The London and the Southend scene.
I think the reason that point kept going around in my head is because it sort of links all these things in that we've been talking about. That there's a lack of culture in Basildon. Because there's a lack of culture. And it's not, like you said, it's self-perpetuating. Why then do people not set up their own scenes? You know, but it all comes back to this point that if you're told constantly that it can't work, then it won't work, will it? And people won't even attempt. It's not that things are failing; they're not even starting. But it's just it's actually enough. Again, it's not really anything to do with your practice as poets or artists. It's just more a general thought, really. And it sort of leads into the next idea that, you know, you could suggest that living in an area without a particularly responsive audience is usually the result in general dearth of culture. And this brings me to the question of inspiration. And do some people need cultural deprivation in order to find inspiration?
I think it helps. I mean, I think that the lack of culture is an inspiration for my writing. In that, sometimes what I find myself doing is trying to find beauty and find art where at first glance you can't see any of it. You know, like that piece that I read out just now was a true story about some arsehole I used to know, and I thought, you know, and I bumped into him in a nightclub, and I thought, like, there's no beauty in that whatsoever. So then you use that as the inspiration for trying to create something beautiful. And I think a lot of my writing is about that, trying to use the lack of culture or the lack of anything worth talking about and turning it into something worth talking about, using it as the stimulus for creativity, you know?
But then, you know, there is also there's a counter argument to that if there is a complete lack of culture or happenings, does that lead to artists sticking to one type of art? And in our case, poets writing one style of poetry because that's a response to one place, and it doesn't really because that place doesn't change. Perhaps your work won't change.
That's a danger, and that is a real danger, and it's something that I'm now having to consciously try and break, because I did look at, you know, I haven't been doing this for a very long time, 1.5 years, but I looked at the little body of work that I've put together, and I would say about 70% of it is very much about the same thing. It's about either an experience of this town, little stories and stuff, or just generic kind of like what it is like to be here. So now I'm trying to push myself creatively to move away from that. I mean, I think I'll always come back to it. It's such a big part of...
Because there's a contradiction that exists there, isn't there? That you both talk of the inspiration you find in Basildon, which doesn't seem like it would inspire anyone, but it's obviously inspired you both. But you've both spoken of developing as artists by travelling to places where there are a huge amount of influences. You know, so it's it's not a complete conflict, but there is a contradiction there, isn't there? That you find inspiration here in Basildon, but need to travel to somewhere, or feel like you need to travel in order to share and to develop as writers.
I do know what you mean, but I think that the Basildon thing will be a constant inspiration for me. It'll always be there in the background, you know, and it definitely was the early inspiration. It's the thing that got me to start writing, and you know, filled up a book and filled up a CD quite happily with that material. But going into London and seeing, mainly seeing other artists, you know, that's really inspired me to kind of develop my writing. There's a poet who me and Sioni have seen quite regularly called Bumi Hazan, very, very talented spoken word artist, and he's really inspired me recently to start writing about completely different stuff. He can go he can go and create pieces quite easily about like kind of like fantasy and kind of science fiction worlds and all that kind of stuff, and he can, although I do believe it's often inspiration is based in real life and real experiences, so you know I do relate to it. He can write these kind of fantastical pieces, which all my stuff has been very deeply rooted in real world before. So now I've written a couple of pieces where I've been pushing myself to kind of try to not emulate his style. I'm not copying you, Bummy, but kind of branch out and try writing about different themes and different ideas. I mean, at the moment, I'm not anywhere with that kind of writing. I'm happy to share it. That's that's baby steps at the moment, but that's the kind of thing I've been trying to do.
I want to move away from sort of accepted adult poetry audiences to younger audiences, because you both work in education. Actually, maybe we'll start, if you both explain what you do for a living, or where you work.
Unfortunately, I'm not a millionaire from poetry yet. I'm hoping that's going to happen sometime soon. The day job is teaching.
Yes.
I'm a primary school teacher at a local school in Basildon, and I mean that's excellent because a large source of my inspiration comes from that. You know, the children are awesome, and you meet people, local people, constantly doing that kind of work. So that's great. I do get inspiration from that. But on top of teaching, I also run poetry workshops.
Yes.
So I go to schools across the Basildon area and
we'll come on to that in a minute. If Sean, if you just
so I work with special needs students in a college, so post 16.
Post 16.
Some are adults. Most are kind of 16 to 18.
Okay. And you, I certainly know because I met Olmo in Sheffield, and we were both attending a poetry in schools seminar, which was run by
Jacob Sam LaRose.
Not Sammy. I got Sammy in my head. I'm terrible with names. And we got talking about primary school teaching and just about how poetry can be used, I mean, in that sense, to teach under 11s. Do you use any poetry in your teaching, or does it come into... No, so maybe just this small part of the conversation more involves a bit more. But, in what way do you use poetry?
Poetry, I use it often as... it can be used as a reward, actually. If I've got a new poem, and it's very different to the stuff I've read here today, like my children's poetry. If I've got a new poem... I can use it as if you're well behaved during the afternoon session, you get to hear a new poem at the end of the day, and my children do really engage with that and enjoy that. But I've found increasingly, especially with doing my workshops as well as in my classroom, using it as a stimulus for writing. I've written a couple of poems recently which are unfinished, and they're unfinished on purpose. They end on kind of like a cliffhanger. So there's one in particular about a spaceman who comes down and he explains how he came to Earth and stuff. And then he says, now I've seen all of your world, and I've got something to say, and then I put it onto the
yeah,
children, and I say, right, if a spaceman had came to Earth, scanned it all, seen everything going on, what do you think he'd say about our planet? And we kind of use it as a stimulus to then create some poetry about that.
Yeah.
And it's powerful. I mean, children will just blow your mind. They haven't got the same reservations as us. We get so scared about going on stage. We go, oh, is our poetry going to be rubbish? Are people going to engage with it? Children do not care. Most children do not care anyway. And they'll get up after only having an hour to write a piece, and they'll give it their best go, and they'll absolutely blow you away with what they produce. And it gives kids a voice as well. I mean, there's a lot of children out there who, for whatever reason, do not have a voice. And I don't think that's just around here. I think that's you get that in any society. Yeah. Children who, for whatever reason, struggle to have a voice in their life, and it's empowering when they're given an opportunity to just share some of their thoughts, share some of their writing with their peers. It's really, really exciting. I love it.
And to bring Sioni back into the conversation, what do you feel could be done to improve poetry education? And you can answer that in with respect to your own schooling and maybe almost from your actual experience with kids.
I don't know. I mean,
well, first of all, actually, do you feel like it's important? Do you think because some actually not all poets feel that it's necessary to improve because they've sort of come toward it later in life and it hasn't really hindered them. Yeah,
I guess. I mean, when I was at school, it's a weird one because I started writing about 18 months ago, and I was already, I'd done my art degree, and so I was kind of already used to like expressing myself or having like a creative outlet. But when I was at school, I think I definitely remember when we came to doing poetry in like English lessons. It was something I enjoyed, I kind of had an enjoyment for it, but I never really pursued it. And I think like it's a difficult one because I mean I definitely enjoyed it, but then I wonder, why didn't I do anything with it until later on in life? I mean, I guess partly I had some English teachers that I didn't really get on with, but then I had some that were really good as well. So it's a strange one, really. I think there's so much poetry that exists that is so engaging and is quite like inspirational, and it makes you want to write yourself. And there was definitely a lot of that was probably included in my education. There was some, there was stuff that doesn't engage you at all, kind of like Lord Byron, how many ways do I love you?
Don't look at me when you say it.
Just really kind of boring and not really my sort of thing. But I think as a rule, it's there, and if you enjoy writing, then you enjoy writing, I suppose. And I think a lot of people kind of find that on their own. But I suppose it's just important, especially for young people, to find some sort of outlet, I guess. Just because that can help you kind of really find your own self. Because especially when you're going through your adolescence, you're always trying to find someone else who's like representing you, and like you use your like music to kind of express yourself. You find a band and you're like, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. Whereas if you find an outlet, then you can. You don't. A lot of young people obviously don't even show it to other people, but it just lets them kind of consolidate in their own head, who they are and what their thoughts are, which is very important.
And for me as well, yeah. So the most important thing I think we can do with poetry in schools and with education is, and I think this is actually just generally in writing, it's something I've kind of experienced and then developed in my teaching, is the children seeing the teacher as a writer. Yeah, I think that's very important. I don't think I had a bad literacy education at all. I mean, I had some really inspirational English teachers, I did, but when the children see the teacher or the facilitator or whoever's leading the lesson as somebody who also writes, that's really good, because you get up and you have a big piece of paper on a wall, you start writing your poem, you cross out lines, you say, oh, it sounds rubbish, you write a new line above it, you say it out loud, you try it out, and they see that whole creative process. And then I think it takes the pressure off of them, as opposed to saying, I am the boss, I have all the answers, this is what a good poem looks like. Let's read a famous one. This is what a good poem looks like. Now make your one.
I think it's a really good point, actually, you just made. I think there's a lot of young people, maybe not the kids because the kids you teach are very young and they're not yet affected by this feeling, but a lot of kids won't draw and show their drawings, they won't make sculptures, they won't write poems and read them out, because all they're exposed to are finished pieces of work.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're judging themselves against people that have been writing for years and years and years. And it's absolutely right. Show your working. Show your shit poems and how things don't work out, because that's creativity. You know, like we were talking about earlier, before we started recording, you don't get anywhere creatively unless you've fucked up hundreds, thousands of times, and realising what is shit and what you have to promise to yourself it won't make those mistakes again. And I think it's important. That kids can't just be exposed to amazing. Of course they can, later on, but they need also that middle ground of seeing the process happen.
Absolutely. I mean, it got to the point now where I write children's poetry, and with my class, I will read them unfinished pieces, ask them what they think. I mean, kids are a great audience because adults, generally speaking, we try to be quite polite to one another. We'll say, yeah, it's okay, I can see what you're doing there. Whereas a kid will turn around and say, I didn't get it. I don't get it, I don't like it. And that really harsh criticism from 9-year-olds has actually really helped my writing in children's poetry. I wrote a piece recently about cavemen, and I thought that it was bloody brilliant. I thought my class are going to love this, and their faces, that said it all. Absolutely, just that kind of like bemused expression on their face. And then I think as well, when they see me turning around and going, oh, that's not very good, that one. See me screwing up and putting it in the bin. I say, oh, I'm going to write another one next week for you. So I think it has helped.
I think we're going to wrap it up.
Absolutely.
I think we've covered everything, but just one last chance to mention any blogs or Twitter accounts, or so people can
find
you and see
Absolutely.
if they want to come along and see if they like what they've heard, and
if they want to follow us. It's always very threatening, isn't it? I'm going to follow you.
Everywhere you go.
So if you want to check out some more of mine and Shoni's work, you can go to facebook.com/Tory Town Poets and there you'll be able to get updated on any of the features we have coming up, or any open mics we're attending, or any information about CDs and books we might have out. On Twitter, you can follow us at Tory Town Poets, and that's all one word. And we've got quite a lot of spoken word videos up now, haven't we?
Yeah, there's a few things on YouTube, some stuff that we did with a friend of ours.
Yeah, Matt Rowley from Matbox Film. Yeah, we've recently done a collaboration with Matbox Film and called the Stonehaven Sessions. So we have some videos up from that as well, and you can find that at youtube.com/Tory Town Poets. You probably didn't have to write that down. It's all pretty straightforward.
What we'll do is all of these links will be in the description
on the
YouTube video when this goes out, so people can just click on there. But basically, if you were to Google Tory Town Poets, there are hundreds of ways of finding out through social media what these two are up to. Thank you, Olmo, Lazarus, and Shirley Richards. It's been good. I've enjoyed it.